Welcome back to our YouTube channel. It's going on YouTube. How's it going?
He's doing good. The one thing that I was thinking about as we were driving here is like when we go to get out of the car, he's like charging out. And
Sure.
Like he needs to like sit and wait because we don't have the leash on. We need to get the leash on him. We don't want him to get away.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something we need to work on.
We can work on some car drills for sure.
Yeah.
And just general threshold boundaries, like coming into doors. Is he usually rushing out the door as well?
Yes,
Okay.
Absolutely. So I mean, look at him like sitting here. Like this is like he wants nothing to do with that.
Sure.
Do that at home.
And it's likely the way that we're enforcing it at home. So it's maybe in our timing, maybe we're getting distracted and we're not following through. I'm not sure. I think you told me that sometimes you have trouble being consistent.
I just want to eat my dinner, and I just
Yeah.
So because unless I'm sitting like this, while everyone else is eating dinner, then I mean that's how it goes, and that's like I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And like when we're trying to practice it at times that we're trying to do something else when we're multitasking, we're not going to be as efficient with it because we're trying to eat, we're frustrated, we've had a long day.
Right.
So that might not be the best time to practice it. And if you are still wanting to do it, I would just find times that you feel like you're, able to be focused on him.
So another thing you had mentioned is like working on him in terms of like maybe it's okay if he's not doing the bed stay, but like he's not under the table and like sniffing and like licking our hands and whatever he's licking our hands.
Yeah.
Well,
so
you know how he is under the table.
Yeah, what I was mentioning is that like bed stays are great for my lifestyle and I love to use them, but I can't assume that all of my clients also love bed stays and want to do them. And it's okay to assess like, do I feel like I want my dog to do a bed stay? I can tell you all the benefits of them and I truly believe in them. But at the end of the day, sometimes people that's not what it's important to them. So
I could probably work with it a little more when you guys are in bed and I'm downstairs reading or something.
It is, I thought about this last night and it is important to me because I want to be able to not have to discipline the dog while I'm eating and be interrupted and just let him sit on the damn bed and be happy and comfortable and know that that's where he's supposed to be. He still doesn't know that this is what he's supposed to be doing. He's like, well, why am I doing this? He's nervous and anxious and...
It's just going to take the habit of doing it and then, holding him accountable when he does get off. So like you said, find a time that it's just a little bit more relaxing to you rather than in the middle of your dinner. Because you're right, at the 5th time he gets up, you're like, F this. I'm hungry. I want to eat my dinner.
I'm tired. I want to clean this kitchen and go to bed.
Yes,
For sure.
So maybe you're picking the wrong time to do it.
Right.
So if we can be successful with it, I think it's beneficial to teach a dog to stay in one place. But until we get to that point, I wouldn't even give him the command unless you're committed to watching him and monitoring him. You can make it easy, start with 10 minutes, set a timer. Be sure to correct him because, every time we've done it here, he's nailed it. He does very well because we're like eyes on him, we're watching him, we're correcting him when he gets off, we're marking properly. And generally, we'd like him to hold the bed stay without us having to like sit here with the leash and like body block him.
Right, and that's how I feel like doing a lot of that.
And again, like the mistake is we're only marking with no when the paw touches the ground. So if he's kind of shifting and he looks like he's gonna jump off, just wait until he actually makes the full mistake and that he's committed to that mistake before you correct him. And what I was saying about dinner time is if you feel like you're eating and he's like under the table and he's jumping on you or pawing you or licking your hands, you can always give corrections for that specific behavior. And an option right now could be crating him while you're eating dinner as well. Yes, I want you to work on the physical behaviors that he's displaying, whether he's like up on you, like scratching you, pawing you when you're eating. And you can correct those separately. I think like long term, he's going to be a dog that if you have your kids' friends come over, that you're going to want to crate him because we have to prioritize safety for everybody, and it can be really challenging to try to host and work with a dog that has the propensity in the past to kind of intimidate people. He's just like we spoke about, like a just very genetically anxious dog that was born this way. And when he's on the bed, he's like, I can't move anymore. I can't go pace around. I can't control the situation. The more we do it and the better habit he's going to become, I do want to see him relax on it. And you can start like this proximity with him. Like, I don't want you to sit right next to him. I want us to be able to get a couple feet of distance. You can leave the leash on the first couple times, but I don't want to get in the habit of guiding him back to the bed with the leash and just standing near it and correcting him through it.
I mean, when you would like get off, you would like leave the room and you physically could
Yeah.
not. I mean, you couldn't drag him.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know.
So we've just checked the box that he still is proficient at the bed stay. Okay? It will just come down to how you're enforcing it at home. So if it is important to you and you want to do it, I fully believe he is capable of doing it. Just pick a time that you're not so distracted, and
That makes sense.
eventually, once he does get better at it, you're going to be able to do it when you're eating dinner, but it can just be too stressful to try to train and eat. We'll do a little doorway drills. You guys don't have to move for this one just yet. Good. So door goes open first, and I want to make sure he's not bolting through. Good. Okay. Good. No. Come back through. Thank you. Good. Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to tell him to sit.
You don't have to. I'm first just making sure he doesn't have the compulsion to just rush out. Sit. Good. Okay. Come on. Come on, buddy. Good boy. Sit. Good. Okay. Perfect.
So what should we do? Because we put him in the back.
Okay, so we'll open the trunk or
You
wherever.
may see what he tries. I mean, he's up there.
Yeah.
I'm afraid he's going to.
Yeah, yeah. Sit. All right, go ahead and open it. No. Sit. So I'm going to have him wait before he gets in. Good. Okay. Now he can get in. And then, oh, I don't know if your trunk will close with this leash in the door, but we will
I
try.
think it will.
We can try it.
All right, go ahead and close it. He might not want to come out because he's,
Thinks he's
yes, yeah.
going someplace.
And then you can go ahead and open it again. Good. And I want to see that he's waiting. So when we're pulling up to the house, just being ready there. I might say, like, leave the leash on. Like, when you go home, try your best to correct him, like, initially. But do drills like this. So we're putting him in and out, so we're getting him used to not rushing out immediately. And we do that with the leash, so we have some means of guiding him back in. But if we don't have the leash on, then we're unprepared. So you can try to even secure the leash to something in the car as you're driving
I was
home.
just going to say,
I could probably put it on him before we open the back door.
Yes, yeah.
He's got his head up there.
Yeah. Okay. And we have to have, like if we're trying to struggle with getting him, like opening the door, getting him leashed up real quick, that can be very challenging. So either wrapping the leash somewhere like above it, it's not getting tangled, or trying to put it on him before you exit the vehicle, just so we have some means of grabbing him if he were to run somewhere. Go ahead and close it.
it's probably traumatic for him too.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just like impulsive behavior to rush out, and I always recommend car drills because we don't know where we're parking. We don't know if he could get startled and run the street, and we don't want to be yanked to the car and have him hit his head, like you said, or when he comes out, he gets really nervous. So it's a good drill to work on. I'd mark with no if he rushes out before being released. So just like we did there, I'm going to have him in the car. If he rushes out, no, correct, and then I'm going to put him back in. Do that a couple of times until he can pause for a moment and then release him. You can go ahead and open it. And Mom, I'm going to give him over to you next. He said, I'm good, I'm just chilling.
He's like, I am so confused.
Okay, come on. Good
Good
job.
try, you did it.
There.
Sit.
Excellent.
Okay.
Perfect. And go ahead and open it. You can grab his leash.
Okay.
And one more time. And go ahead, open it. Perfect. Yes, he thought about it. And then go ahead, release.
Okay.
Perfect. You guys can go ahead and switch, and we'll have Dad do a couple. It is a lot to think about. You're thinking about like his sit.
Yeah, sure.
But the principle is that we don't want to allow him to bolt into the car.
Right.
We want him to have a minute. So try not to physically ever put him into the sit with the leash. It's okay to guide him.
Got it. Okay.
But I want him to be able to sit completely unassisted.
And not just to hear the word now.
Yes, yeah. And the more you practice this, it's just going to become second nature, and it's not going to be so complicated. Let's end on success, buddy.
Okay. Okay.
You can guide him up a little. There you go. Is everything making sense with the car?
Yes.
It just, you're correcting the initial impulse, because he has a very, very strong impulse just to get
Fly
into
in,
things. Which we've noticed when he comes for daycare, he has that impulse with the crate, like getting back into the crate.
And that's something I've been trying with him. Our crate door lifts up, though,
Yes,
so
yeah.
it's hard to get him to...
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to tell you, though, because you have a very distinct no.
Yeah.
And like, I think in the past we would just yell no, thinking that that was the way you're supposed to do it. But because
get louder when you
because I teach preschool, and I'm like, I find myself in the classroom, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Good.
I'm just using your no. Oh, look at all these handsome friends.
And you
Do
can...
these two know each other?
Yeah, they're brothers. Not biologically, obviously, but...
Keep the way down. Yeah, down. And then we go around. He's frenzied. Yeah. He can't think straight. This is why I'm like, am I doing it right? Is he gonna get it eventually? He will. You just gotta stay calm. You can't feed it as fast. Oh, maybe you're left-handed. Okay, let's go the other way. Let's try again. Oh, he is left-handed. So we need the booty down. Okay. And you basically, that's why I was like, am I doing this right?
He has no idea what's going on.
So we're luring him into a down. And then you pull the head back and around. Yay! Like that. Let's try again. Down. Oh, you're going this way now. He's trying both directions. And then you come around and over. Yay! Good job, buddy. Let's try again. Wow. There's a snack. You go down. And you pull back and around. Yay! Pizza. Roll over. Oh, you went the other way.
I think that was an accident.
We'll give it to him.
Hey guys, welcome back to our client spotlights. This week we will be featuring a very dedicated couple, and these are people that really started out with their dogs fighting in the household, and since we've transformed the dogs to a beautiful level of training, and that could not have been possible without the dedication of their owners. These people have followed every piece of advice I've given them. They really listen. They ask such immaculate, beautiful questions, and their focus is really on bettering their dogs. And they love these dogs so much, and that's so refreshing to just see somebody that is so into the dog training and improving their dog's life for the better. And that will be Penny and Copper, our hound girl sisters. And if you know hounds, you know that they can be a little bit nuts sometimes. But these girls have been nothing short of amazing, and Alex and Delaney have just been incredible in guiding their dogs through the training program, and we've accomplished so much, and I just really enjoy being with them too. It's a easy 2 hours, and I just feel like we're kind of hanging out, training dogs, and we've seen such a massive improvement from the dogs getting into fights in the house and them battling with vets that would say that they needed extensive blood work and medication, to the dogs being completely unmedicated and running off leash in a field. It's just been absolutely incredible. So shout out to Delaney and Alex and Penny and Copper. All about the world. Are you ready for Halloween? He's working on some reactivity right now. He's like actually a really good boy. Hey guys, it's Bridget with Miracle Canine Training, and I thought a good discussion topic would be how to know when your dog is off leash ready. So I'd like to go over some points about, perfecting your recall that have really worked for us in our training program. This is specifically going to be about e-collar training and how we instruct our clients to go about training in public and getting that recall looking fire. The first step would be ensuring that you have a proficient command inside. So we want to see that we're working in a low distraction area first, and we're teaching our dog the recall, meaning come means come to me and stay with me. This can look like inside of your house or your apartment, wherever you may live, just repping out the habit of your dog hearing come and them following through with the command. If we're using the e-collar, if we're starting to see the dog become distracted or disengaged from us, we can give that correction and hopefully have led up to the work of our dog understanding what that correction means and coming straight back to us. After we feel like the come command in the house in low distraction is really good, I'm talking like 10 out of 10 times, we can start taking it outside. And I generally use a long line for this. I recommend about a 10 to 20 foot as we're practicing. This could be in our backyard, our front yard, maybe a local park. And I want to see, again, that the level of proficiency with the command is pretty much excellent. This can be a little rocky at first as we're going outside when there's distractions, bikes, people, cars, whatever it may be. And I want to see that the dog is able to disengage from those things they may be pursuing and ultimately come back to me, making sure that we're engaged with one another. I do tend to use a lot of food and reward, whether that's physical praise or a toy, to keep the recall exciting, because I want to see that dog running to me. I want to see them knowing exactly what I'm asking of them. And then from there, you can start to generalize the command to parks, playgrounds, things that are a little bit busier, maybe your favorite trail, and practice just getting their attention when you do say that. The best turning points of an off-leash training session is when you start to see your dog pursue something, you tell them no, you correct them, and they can easily come back to you. During this stage, you can feel free to continue using your long line if you're not as confident with some of these situations just yet. So it's better to be safe at these stages than feel like you're a little bit nervous about going through the motions of your command. If you're starting to unclip your leash finally and your dog is starting to take off or getting a little bit too far ahead of you, go ahead and use your recall. See if you can check in with them several times during your off-leash walk, get them coming back to you, and then you can start to begin to feel a little bit more confident taking them out in public places and doing more off-leash activities. As always, use caution around roads and busier places. Keep an eye out for your dog. I often say I don't want my dog to go out of my eyesight, but those are typically the tips and tricks that we use when guiding clients to officially, okay. So the main thing that we are looking for is that our dog's responsiveness to the word come is a conditioned response, meaning when I say come, I'm almost seeing that head snap and I'm seeing the dog fully committed to coming to me once called and able to stay in my position and not be too concerned about what's going on around them. So hope these tips help you with your off-leash goals if you have them, and if you don't, that's okay too. Happy training.
All right. So obviously your mom, Roberta, she told me very, very briefly about some of the stuff that you guys are kind of dealing with over there.
Yeah.
So let's kind of start with, why don't you kind of give me a little bit of a recap on stuff. Let me know where you're
Okay.
at with things. Let me know what some of your big goals you have are, stuff like that.
Draco, he's a mix between a French and an English bulldog.
Mhm.
He he's, long story short, went through a lot of different changes, but since then, so we had a baby about 5 months ago, and I've seen a shift in his behavior. He's always been very more prevalent to be around women in the beginning. It's gotten better with males, but in regards to the baby, and then Michaela, my fiance, he definitely has a sense of like protectiveness
Mhm.
around both, a little bit too much. And what we've tried to do, in that regard, is we've tried to kind of separate him from Michaela and the baby. We have like baby gates up, just to kind of give him some distance between them. But besides like the protectiveness, some of the things that just overall that he does is like if a mailman or a stranger comes at the door, he loses his mind. Like very vicious barks, and really does not like little kids at all. Like he sees one, he gets very anxious. And last time it happened, he like kind of like the kid wasn't close to us, was walking by, and he kind of just out of nowhere snapped and lunged and like barked real viciously again. Right now, what I've been doing is to help train. Like we have like a not, well, it's like a shock collar we bought from Amazon, and it has like a vibrating like pulse you can send, or like a shock. And I'll put that on him some days, not every day. And I'll what I do is I hit a beep before I hit the vibration or the shock, to get him to understand, if you hear the beep, that's when you need to stop right then and there, so you don't get the shock. And then what I'll do is, within the past couple months, what I've done is, so we have another dog, Oakley. He's a black lab, very hyper, very excited. What we've done with both of them really is, anytime they go in, or come in from outside, or they go outside, or before they eat, I make both of them sit. I tell them to stay, and what I've been training on is from the stay, and I only have to say it once. And then they sit there and they stay. And then once I say break, that's whenever they can either go outside or they can eat. But that's like the extent that I've gone with training.
And where would you say his behavior is like the worst? So obviously, I know you said, he gets reactive when somebody's walking up to the house. You said, obviously, with the kids, he could be very anxious around kids. Now, the situation where you said he kind of lunged at the kid, was that out on a walk?
We were sitting at a picnic table at a winery when a kid had walked by.
Where would you say the behavior is the worst? Like, what's it like when people are actually over the house?
Socialization around him with people is our biggest thing.
And particularly people over the house. Is that kind of where the big goal is with this?
Yes.
And walk me through, like, currently, like, if you're going to have somebody come over the house, what do you do with it?
So we haven't had much exposure to that. I mean, the people that come over the house most often is her parents. And
we had like an end of the summer party.
Mhm.
We put Oakley and Draco in a room as people came in. And then after a while, we had let them out. And then he went outside and he was...
The only thing that like happened, if you remember, it was Blake.
But I say that was Blake's fault, because he was running in our backyard acting crazy, and that intimidated or scared Draco, and then Draco went after him.
Blake is a human, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what did he do? Did he bite him? Did he just run over barking at him?
He ran over and he said he was bit, but when I went down to like look at him, he didn't have like a bite mark or an open wound or anything like that.
That particular situation, two things. One, I really try my hardest to not make excuses for the dog with these types of things, right? You know, I don't care if somebody's running around my house, having fun, doing whatever it is they're doing. If they're not like directly antagonizing the dog, my dogs are expected to ignore that, right? Or if they're not ignoring it, they should not act aggressively towards it, right? So that's one thing right off the rip with that. Thing number two, it's not surprising that in that type of a context, how many people did you have over, would you say, for that?
30?
So a lot.
Maybe
20.
20.
Quite a bit. Yeah. Okay. So it's not uncommon in a situation where there's a lot of people that the dog behaves better in those scenarios. And that's for, you know, the reason we refer to it as the dog is essentially flooded by stimulus, right? So it's more difficult for them to like single out like an individual person or an individual trigger because everything around them is a trigger. So they kind of just get overwhelmed by it and like shut down a little bit, which is why it makes sense why he was good until one thing happened that he was able to single out, right? So all that to say, generally speaking, parties and stuff like that, especially if you have a dog that has any sort of like social issues, it's usually a really bad environment for them. It's like we had last summer, we had a big pig roast at our house. We probably had like 50 people over the house, and all our dogs are well behaved at this point. They're social. They can be out with their guests. We don't have any issues or concerns with that, but we put them away for that. Like it was just too much. Where one, too much stimulus for the dog. Thing number two, in a party environment like that, generally speaking, we're not going to be able to be as on top of supervising the dog as we need to catch the little things. You know what I mean? So
Right.
as we're working through this, one baseline thing that we're going to kind of set is that if you're going to be in a situation where one, there's either going to be a lot of people over the house, or two, you're going to be in a situation where maybe it's just two people coming over the house, but you guys are having, I don't know, you know, some beers for the game, or you know, you're going to be distracted. Generally, it's best to just put the dog away in those situations because we're trying to stack wins, and when we're not able to supervise, generally that's where things go bad, right?
If your parents come over, we really don't do anything with them. We let them roam. He has no problem with her parents. Most he does is just gets very excited, and like he'll like, you know, try to like jump, like put his paws up on your leg.
Yep. Okay. So he's really good with them. He just gets really excited when they come over.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So great. Obviously, I don't have any issues with you know, being excited. I want him to be happy to see people. One commonality we'll see when we deal with dogs that are struggling with like fear aggression issues is that they struggle with the impulse of being extremely fearful, but they also struggle with the impulse of being overly aroused, right? So I try to pinpoint things with the over arousal that we can create some boundaries for. And essentially what we want to do is we want to take the really exciting things and make them like just slightly less exciting, where we still have control over the dog. And we want to take those scary things and make them slightly less scary, so we still have control over the dog, to kind of make a little bit more of even rules across the board. Because if we're basically saying, you know, when you like people, do whatever you want to do, get excited, go crazy. But when you're scared of people, we totally shift the rules on you and we start creating all this expectation and stuff. We create a contrast in his mind of some people are good and some people are bad. But obviously the jumping and the mouthing, even if it's people that he likes, right? Those are things we're ultimately going to want to be correcting for. Now we'll get into how to do that obviously in a little bit here, but I'm just kind of starting the list here. Now, when you guys are just hanging out in the house, guests aren't coming over, you said, mailman, is it anybody that walks by the house will he get reactive towards? Or
We'll go with yes. Yeah.
what else would you say that he rehearses as far as nuisance behaviors when it's just we'll say the three of you, you two and the baby? Does he get into stuff? Is he jump on counters? Anything else that you would say?
He's everywhere now.
He'll like mark everywhere. Like he pees in the house. It's not like every day. It's like maybe once every other week, but it's consistent enough where it's a problem.
Sure. So, okay. So a couple times a week, he's having an accident in the house. Now you mentioned marking. Is it deliberate marking or it's not?
No.
Gotcha.
Now, whenever he goes to the bathroom outside,
Mhm.
he like takes his back legs and like, you know,
Yeah, that's fine.
throws the grass up. Okay.
Yeah. Like kicks it up.
Yeah, like it's unexplained. Like it doesn't make any sense as to, I mean, to like me,
Sure. Does he do
why and where he's peeing at.
Does he do it right in front of you, or does he sneak off and do it?
Sneaks off.
Is it in a different spot every time or the same spot?
Different.
Different like every time, or is there like maybe 3 spots he rotates between?
Well,
Kitchen, Walker's room, bathroom,
Yeah.
and sometimes the hallway.
Gotcha. And in those situations, can you think of any sort of, commonalities as far as, maybe, he hadn't been let out in 3 or 4 hours, or, you guys were actually gone or anything like that? Or is it just randomly you walked in? It's like, oh crap, he did it.
so 2 things. One, it's happened a couple times when we've been gone. Now, granted, there's been a couple times where we've been gone, pretty long throughout the day. And it'll happen then. But one of the things I'll notice is like if Michaela and I were like, okay, we're gonna go to bed, or we're gonna go lay down and take a nap or whatever, and he's not included.
Yep.
Right. Well, one of us comes out to the hallway or whatever, and then there's pee there.
So you would say it's in situations where it's not necessarily that, he's hanging out with you and you just miss that he sneaked off around the corner. It's like you guys are doing something where he's not included in that, and then you come out and find it. Is that, would you say that's pretty consistent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that sequence, let's say we put him in another room, we close the door, and we're doing whatever. Will he be like barking and scratching at the door first, and then it stops?
Yeah, he'll cry, like he'll whimper a lot.
Gotcha. Well, so I don't like to say dogs do things out of spite necessarily, but it is a common picture that we'll hear that like, hey, like if we needed to, for whatever reason, close a dog off into another room because we're going to be distracted doing something, and the dog doesn't like that they will have an accident in those situations, right? And like I said, I don't think it's they're intentionally like, screw you, I'm going to go pee over here or anything like that. I think it's just they get themselves anxious, and then it's just like, that's just how they go and diffuse that, right?
Right.
So all of, generally speaking, when it comes to accidents in the house, it's not so much a matter of correcting for it necessarily. It's all about breaking the patterns of those types of things. So even if that's not 100% of the time, the exact situation and pattern that you'll run into with those types of things, we want to make sure that we're at least checking that one off, that if it's probably a big one. And if we could block that pattern, it's probably going to make them more successful later on. So if you're in a situation where you're going to need to leave him in another room for something, just start letting him out immediately before you go to do that. Even if he was just out 20 minutes before that, start breaking the cycle of let him clear anything out of his system, then go put him in that area. And then once you go and put him in that area, if he does do anything like, let's say, scratching at the door or excessively barking in that area, a little whimpering and whining, I'll tolerate that. That's not the end of the world, obviously. But any sort of like really demanding behaviors, those types of things we could then correct for to help reduce the anxiety a little and get him a little more okay with, hey, you got to be over there, right? You can't just like push yourself back into this area. Like example, like I was just downstairs with all my dogs. I have 4 dogs, right? And I came up here obviously to do it, and they're still loose down on the first floor right now, right? And hypothetically speaking, if I was having this issue right before I walked up into this area, I would have just let them out real quick to check that box that I know none of them have to go. So I have nothing that I'm going to walk downstairs to, right?
Right.
And you just do that repeatedly until it's like, oh, okay, cool. We're in a rhythm where it's been 2 months, 3 months, 4 months without having a problem with that, where it's like, all right, well, it's not patterned in anymore of this thing that they just do. So I probably can get away with, as long as they were out a reasonable amount of time before that, of them just not like sneaking off and doing it. And that's the same thing, whether it's, a situation where we're not closing him into another room and he's just sneaking off and going to the bathroom. We would just block that pattern as well of anytime he were looking like he's going to go sneak off, let's just take him out real quick just to triple check that he's not trying to sneak off to go. And usually once you do that for like a month or 2, you'll totally break that habit where you could let him sneak off, and it's no longer this thing in his repertoire that he's going to go and rehearse. Anything else, even like nitpicky little things that you notice out of him?
So I wrote down a few things. I mean, it covers pretty much all of it. I don't want to have to worry about, him going after somebody or lunging or coming off very viciously, because he's not a vicious dog. And That's the biggest thing I want to correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's start talking about those things then. So a lot of times when we're dealing with dogs that are having like fear-based aggression issues towards guests coming in the house, it's like a multifaceted issue. Like obviously the overarching solution is going to be to start to create some boundaries and correct for some of this kind of stuff, which again, like I said, we're gonna get into here. But past that, I think a lot of times we look at it as different extremes and we focus on certain things over others. And what I mean by that is, let's take the walking by the house, for example, right? Obviously, that's a thing on your list that you don't want him to do. But in many cases, we'll look at the reactivity towards random people walking down the street as something that's different than the aggression issues or the fear aggression issues we're seeing towards guests in the house, where I always equate it to like, let's say hypothetically, he's freaking out at somebody walking by the street. Right now, the reason why we generally look at it as something that's different is one, we've normalized this idea that dogs should just like bark at guests outside, right? And keep intruders away and all that kind of thing, right? And two, there's a barrier separating him from those triggers that he's ultimately barking at. So like he's never going to get in contact with them. So it's like we don't really get overly concerned about those types of things, but we get concerned about it when they're actually in the house. But the frame of mind I try to get people into is like, let's say hypothetically, he's rehearsing, freaking out the window towards everybody for months on end, years on end, whatever it may be. And suddenly one day that barrier just like disappears, right? The door gets left open. Somebody, leaves something unlatched where he's able to slip out of the gate in the backyard, something like that. Like, I would say, what do you think the dog would be doing at that point? He would be running towards that person to rehearse the same thing that you've seen in the house. And in a lot of cases, it's usually a lot worse because you have that frustrated buildup of him being held back, then just like launched at him, right? So I try to focus on first and foremost, before I worry about people in the house, I get the people not in the house totally under control, right? We need to see basically a complete reduction in towards that like reactivity towards strangers walking by, so that we're starting with an even baseline of you don't have to worry about those people. They're not actively coming in. You need to worry about what's going on actively in your house, so there's not all this frustration and this kind of build-up response. Then when people are coming over in the house, it's that much easier because he hasn't been practicing it for the last 4 months before that person came over the house, right? So we're starting on a little bit more even of a slate with things.
Where I work 7 days a week, and some of the days I'm, an hour away. Sometimes I'm home. I'm not always home when the mailman comes or, whenever. So it's not a consistent, practice with him.
So the times you're not home, would you be the one that's actively with him then?
Because I work 5 days out of the week.
And is that where, like a family member would be there, or?
Yeah, my mom's here.
Okay. And I'm assuming he's out when she's there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Well, listen, so obviously when you're in situations where you have somebody else that's watching the dog like somewhat regularly, it's less ideal from the standpoint of like inevitably there's going to be scenarios he's getting away with it because, we need to work on you guys right now. And until you guys get really good with this, it's going to be difficult to educate other people on what to do for it. That being said, I always tell everybody the power of association is a very real thing, which basically what I mean by that is, let's say, like if I go on vacation, generally speaking, I'll leave like one of my dogs with my parents, right? And I know with 100% certainty that they are not doing anything with them. They're not enforcing any rules. There's no consequences for anything. Like I know they're probably at least 20% more like poorly behaved with them than they ever would be with me. But the second that they see me again, when I get back, they know what the rules are and they know that I'm going to be consistent about enforcing those rules. And that's not because every single time I get back, I have to spend 3 days brushing up on the training. They just know from the second that I get back, if they were to rehearse A, B, C, or D, there's going to be a consequence for it. Right. So because of that, I get back and they just behave again. Right. And it's all fine and dandy and everything. So I wouldn't worry too much about what's going on when you guys aren't actively there. And what'll happen is as you guys get this a little bit more under control with you guys there, it should get easier for her once you guys aren't there. And then at that point, any slack that needs to get picked up, you generally can generalize that information to them pretty easily. So obviously you said you use the beep before you use any sort of stim. You said you're somewhat consistent with it when you're actually home with him. Now, when you use that beep, is it like you're beeping like 3 times before you give a correction? Is it consistent that you give one beep and then there's a stim after right away if he doesn't listen? Or where would you say you're at with that?
Yeah, so typically what I'll do is I'll look at Draco. I'll say, Draco, enough.
Mhm.
If he doesn't, I'll beep him. He gets one beep. He continues. Then I'll send the stim to him.
So you have like a 3-part warning system.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So that's fine. This is normal to what I would say a lot of people do. And I understand the logic behind it, which is like, let's give him a chance, you know?
Right.
But the big thing I always tell everybody is, do we want the dog to stop when we say Draco, or do we want him to just stop rehearsing the behavior altogether? And generally speaking, we want him to stop rehearsing the behavior altogether, right?
Right.
So I looked at like our no marker or our beep or whatever it is that we're using to tell him that he's doing something incorrect, not as a command, but as a marker. And what I mean by that is a command would mean that when I say this word, there's an expectation of you and you have the opportunity to follow it without the need of any sort of correction. A marker is basically just the glue between the correction and the behavior, right? So let's take the example of the fence fighting in the yard that you're mentioning. So let's say we're out in the yard, we've got the e-collar on him, obviously, and he goes charging that fence line. How I would handle that situation is I would use a no marker simply to identify the mistake, letting him know that thing you're doing right there is what you're about to get corrected for. And then regardless of if he stops when I say no or not, I'm going to stim right there and then. Right. And basically what that's going to happen is that's going to create a contingency that every single time I rehearse this behavior, X consequence happens, which will basically 10X expediting the process of the behavior just going away altogether. Right. And that would basically apply to any of these types of things I marked down that you guys are going to want to be correcting. So jumping, mouthing, fence fighting, freaking out the window towards things, stuff like that. Now, you mentioned you use it for the come command also. As we start this process of kind of chipping away at some of these, generally speaking, I try to pick like 2 things at a time that we correct for. That way we don't create too much confusion. And I try to pick things to correct for that don't really have an expectation behind them. Like a come command has an expectation of like, you need to actually perform this act, right? All of those other things are just behavioral things where basically we're telling him you could do anything you want to except that thing, right? So I try to pick things that ultimately he could just avoid as opposed to things he needs to perform initially. Now, later on, we could use it for the come command. We could use it for downstays. We could use it for bed commands. We use whatever we want to use it for, obviously. But initially, we've got to make sure that we're stopping some of these unwanted behaviors first, and not just stopping them, but putting him in a position where then once we've stopped them, he could be successful in not rehearsing them. So let's take again, fence fighting as an example. If over the next week, 100% of the time when he goes in the backyard, one of you two, at least when you guys are home, one of you two is actively there to supervise him and make sure that if he rehearses that behavior, he gets a correction for it. And at that gets a fairly motivating correction for it. What you'll see is that it'll go from he's rehearsing it to he's not rehearsing it anymore. And he might be just like a little bit stressed in the yard to he rehearses not performing it for 5 to 6 days and realizes, oh, nothing bad happens as long as I don't do this thing. And we need to allow him to go through that entire cycle, not just the stopping of the behavior, right? Now, that being said, I would say that right now, you got to walk before you run with a lot of this kind of stuff. You got to tackle this stuff in the house and not put him in too many other situations that are going to be really stressful and cause him to essentially react. Because again, yes, like we hypothetically would go into that scenario and make sure he's behaving himself. If he tried to, lunge over or bark or react, we would correct him for it. But the most important part of giving any sort of corrections for these things, especially when we're using more motivating ones for stuff like this, is we need to correct the issue, have the issue go away, and then build on success with it. And if you're doing 14 different things at once, he's never going to get into that state of mind of, oh, I learned what that consequence is for, and I learned how to avoid it, because it's constantly shifting, right? The expectation's going from this to this to this to this to this, right? So got to make sure that you do like 1 or 2 things at a time with it. And just given your list here, the 2 biggest ones that are going to impact you right now are going to be the fence reactivity and the window reactivity right now. And honestly, I would probably say right now, if you can get the fence reactivity and the window reactivity under control over the next week, I wouldn't put him in any situations where he's going to be around a trigger in an interaction type of way, like a guest coming over or, you know, taking him out and about around those types of triggers where he's going to even fail. You know what I mean? I want to stack the wins and the success and just create one really crystal clear expectation of him. Right.
Okay.
And then from there, like I said, cool. Next week we talk. It's like, all right, things are going pretty good. He's not freaking out the window as much. He's not freaking out at the fence as much. All right, cool. Well, let's start tackling now people coming into the house and making sure that his behavior is going to be appropriate in those situations as well. Right. And then same deal. We get a week of success with that. All right, now maybe we tackle, let's take him to the winery. Right. And let's see how he does in that type of context. But we have some, you know, kind of prerequisites as far as like when I go out in public with my dogs, if we're going to go to a patio, or something like that, you got to be very careful about the spot that you pick and making sure that he's not in like a really high traffic foot area, and making sure that, you know, ideally if you got like a corner you could get yourself seated in so you could only focus on what's going on around you. You know, there's a lot of kind of do's and don'ts as far as that kind of stuff that right now it's like if we can get things perfect in the house, but like you can't take him to a winery, like that's not really the end of the world just yet.
Wow, I haven't heard this song in a minute. So what's going on?
It's from a computer that we talked about earlier. All of her reactivity is still there. Like
Yep.
she walks her on a leash, but everything else is just still where it was.
Sure. Where are you noticing that it's been, I mean, obviously I know you said it's all still there, but where is the worst area? And kind of outline to us how you've been trying to work through it since she's been back.
Okay, so the worst is probably like the cats, and around here dogs lunge and bark at you. Like it doesn't seem to matter if they're like the neighbor's dog or you're on a walk. They all seem to do it, and no one really cares. Like I do, but no one else seems to give a darn if their dog's trained or not.
Convenient, right?
Right.
So yeah, so they just, oh, it's great, it's a dog, whatever. But like she doesn't back down from it.
Yeah. Sure.
So like I've noticed though, if the dog is like inside and she can't see it, she doesn't really react to it.
She doesn't.
Not really, no. But she
Okay.
didn't really before. Like there was, I think, once, but a dog hit a door at her and she got mad at that. But like she'll walk by, and our neighbors with the privacy fence, she doesn't really mess with their two dogs, but the other ones she just can't seem to leave alone.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. And when you've seen it, like let's say, so the cat situation, is that like in the yard or is that just through the neighborhood? Both. Okay. Well, let's say in the yard, when you've seen it, how have you tried to address it so far?
So I say no and hit the thing. Like when she steps towards it or starts to jump and bark at it. Usually her sign is she'll just like raise up. And that's when she's starting her crazy. But I've noticed she's been watching them longer. So I don't know if during the watching process she's just building up to explode on them.
Sure.
At the same point, I did have one day where I accidentally corrected too soon, and then it made the explosion even better.
Like bigger, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay. So it seemed to like escalate her when you did it?
it definitely did.
Yep. And when you've corrected for it, have you just started high or have you kind of tried lower then slowly worked up?
I tried lower, and I thought like maybe if I did it on high, like she would just knock it off.
Yeah.
So I tried it, and like there was no effect at all.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times what we'll find is that, especially initially post going home, we'll see owners for like, let's say a couple days, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it may be. They'll start with the expectation. We go home, it's like, all right, well, we're past training. You know, she should be better with this. We probably aren't going to need as high of a level. And we almost go into it a little too optimistic. And what'll happen is we'll try to work low on the e-collar, right? And it won't work, and we'll try low for too long, to the point where we almost teach them that that low correction is what triggers the behavior and causes her to escalate in the first place, right? And then, you know, we'll ping pong from that to trying to start just all the way up. And because we've had 2 or 3 days or 4 days or whatever it may be, right, of, you know, failed repetitions at lower levels, she's essentially thinks you're bluffing when you try it at a higher level, and it causes them to escalate in the first place with it, right? So obviously, you know, we need to make sure the correction is as motivating as possible, but we're probably going to need to do a little bit of like deconditioning of the response, meaning I would almost expect the next couple times we go to try this, let's say we just start all the way up with it, I would almost expect that the first correction I give is almost going to trigger her, and we need to give a follow-up correction for the triggered response from it. Yeah, so you can tell still very distracted by the fence line, which is why she didn't lay into the down, which is why we're still being just as firm on this, because this behavior we're seeing right now, even though the dogs aren't out, it's the same thing, just on a more minor spectrum, right?
Okay.
So by addressing it in these types of contexts, like what I try to do is I try to chase these little mistakes like this and be just as firm on them, because it's going to give you more leverage in the big situations, right? We need her essentially perfect when those dogs aren't out, so that when they are out, she doesn't go from like 0 to 100. Maybe she just goes from like 0 to 50, right? How much training in the backyard have you done so far?
There's not very many times that the dogs next door
Yeah.
are out, but we keep trying to come out when they're out to
Yeah.
work it.
Mhm.
Like earlier when she was in her place, they weren't out, and then all of a sudden one appeared.
Yeah, I gotcha. What's your relationship with that neighbor like?
Good, I guess.
The reason why I ask is because obviously I would like to do this again with you, maybe in a situation where we could get him to help us by letting the dogs out, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
Obviously not right now, but we'll set something up where, you know, when he's available to maybe let, you know, one dog out at a time so we could work on this together.
Okay.
I think that would probably be very helpful.
Do you need the most offensive dog? Or one of the
You said he has 3 of them, is that what you said, or 4?
He has 3, but his girlfriend brings her other one over, and it's pretty much there all the time. So
Gotcha.
there's 4.
And you said amongst those 4, there's a pecking order as far as which one she likes better or worse?
Yep.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously I would like to have access to all of them, and I would probably start with the easiest one and then work my way up to the hardest one.
Wait, the puppy gets kind of scared of her.
Sure. Yeah.
Understandably.
Yeah, right.
It likes to instigate, so it'll come out, sound the alarm, and go in and get the other ones.
Yeah.
And then they'll out.
That's funny.
Okay. I also have a question on my notes.
Mhm.
That I was hoping to ask while I have you guys.
Why don't you ask that first, and then we'll talk about the other stuff.
Okay. So, after she's done barking like an idiot inside, then she'll start this whining thing.
Yeah.
Which we've never whined before. So do I correct that too? Or sometimes with the neighbor stuff, she'll whine instead of going after them because she can't really see them.
Yeah. And she does that inside or outside?
Inside.
She does that inside. Okay. Yes, I would absolutely correct that, because it's the same behavior. Just like we talked about, what we saw outside was the same behavior, just really, really low on the spectrum of it, right? That's the same behavior, just a little higher on the spectrum of it, right? So we refer to, when we talk about reactivity, I always say there's like a spectrum to it, right? And like a sequence of escalation where it starts off where she's like fixated and knows it's there, but hasn't really acted on it yet, right? So it's the first sign of being distracted by the trigger. I'm not gonna correct that, but I am gonna test that. So like outside, how we asked her to do a down, and she was distracted by it, and we used that as our opportunity to give a couple of corrections to get her undistracted by it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yep.
Kind of.
Yep. So when she's distracted by the trigger at first, what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask her to do something, right? So we asked her to down outside. And when she didn't down because she was distracted by the trigger, we were able to correct for that outside to get her no longer distracted by it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the whining is kind of the next step up from that. So the whining is she's distracted by it, and now she's starting to act on it, right? So she's thinking about reacting, right? So that we would correct for, because that's the start of the reactivity. That's what we don't want her to do. We don't want her to escalate any further past that point, so we would set our boundary right there for it. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so inside of the house, obviously we want to correct that right away, and we want to correct that at that high level for it. So any of that whining, we want her totally not concerned about what's going on out there. We want her hearing the dog outside and being like, whatever. It doesn't mind me, right? It doesn't bother me right now. So we need to get that inside of the house first and foremost here. So, was that did you have anything else as far as the question was concerned? That question?
No.
Let's see what we get.
No.
Yep. Perfect. Can you turn the camera around so we can see her?
I'm trying.
You're good.
Real? No. No.
And then go ahead and correct again for that right there. For the staring out the window at it.
Oh, no.
There you go. So we need to see her disengage from that completely. So we'll see what she does here.
Any afterwards?
Yes. So right there, see how she disengaged from it?
Uh-huh.
Now if she goes back and like stares out the window like she's going to react again, you're going to correct again for that. So that right there.
No.
Perfect. There we go.
Usually she'll bounce from this one to the other room.
That's okay. But see what she did right there? She came to you, right? She's now not looking out the window, not bouncing to the other one. She actually just looked at you right there. That was perfect.
Between my legs right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Now, don't pet her or anything right now, because obviously we don't want to reinforce any of this state of mind here. But that's the key. I'm really glad we saw that right there, because the key is a lot of people get really hung up on the barking, right? She's barking, so we correct for it, and then once they stop barking, they stop correcting. But, like we just talked about, the reactivity is more than just the barking, right? The reactivity is that whole puffed up, standing at the fence line, looking for trouble kind of state of mind, and we need to see her totally disengage from that. And if she's not barking, but still staring out that window looking for trouble, that's still her wanting to rehearse that behavior. That's still her caring about that distraction. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, but so is she, like when she looks over at the neighbors or out the window and she is just watching things go by, like, is that okay?
You have to ask that's a really good question. You've got to ask yourself the question of, is she looking for trouble or not? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of dog dependent. It's a little tough sometimes, because there's absolutely times,
I never really know.
right? There's absolutely times with my dogs, like we've got a bunch of windows in our living room, and they'll sit there and just casually stare out them, and it's whatever. They're not looking for anything. They're just sitting there taking in the scenery, and I have no problem with that. But you could definitely tell when it switches to, like, there might be a dog there.
The posture.
The posturing.
Oh, yeah. There's like the perk up and
Yes, she gets stiff and kind of perched up and stuff like that, and that's where you want to correct it right away, right? And I would almost rather you be a little proactive about where you're giving the correction, meaning, even if you feel like it might be on the line of like, maybe she's looking for trouble, maybe she's not, I would almost rather initially you just correct it. And, if she wasn't looking for trouble, whatever, don't worry about what's going on out there right now. If she was, obviously good thing that you corrected it, at least until you get a better handle on this right now,
Okay.
You want to almost kind of let her know right now, don't worry about anything going on outside. You need to just focus on inside, not those dogs, not any of that stuff, right?
And that high level correction is going to matter more when it's lower on that spectrum, like David was saying.
Yeah.
So the fact that we can correct for this stuff now will help us in that stuff later. Kind of like how he was saying, like working outside while the dogs aren't outside will be helpful, so that when they are outside and we've completely gone extreme on that spectrum, she's already had that practice.
Was there anything you got to work with from what we talked about last time? I'm trying to think, what were the big things? The walking? Yeah.
The doors, she doesn't run out of the doors.
Oh, that was the big thing we worked on. Yeah. So the doors got better?
Yes.
Cool.
Well, then she did
New to the whole dog
surprisingly
thing.
well getting out of the car without that parking head.
Well, here's the cool thing, right?
Yeah.
When you're using corrections that are actually motivating and you're consistent about them, the dog learns, right? you know, I always say we shouldn't be contingent on the e-collar, right? We use it, obviously, we use it regularly, but I don't want to have it on or else my dog doesn't listen. So that's why we make sure we're consistent about our consequences and they're motivating so that when the e-collar's on, we don't even need to use it that much. So when it's off, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and walk this way. So I want to see you do, the doors here going in. Do the doorway here just like we did last time. Remember, loose on your leash, let her make the mistake. Loose on the leash. There you go. Go ahead and open the door, let her make that mistake and correct for it right when she does. Wow, all right. Look at that. And then you can do the gate going into the back as well. Same deal, loose on that leash, let her make the mistake if she's gonna make it. I'm impressed. That's a hell of a lot better than last time.
Good job.
Cool, go ahead and walk her in.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, that looked fantastic right there. Sometimes what we'll find is that by holding the tension on the leash, we actually cause them to make the mistake. If we're constantly pulling back, it's gonna make her wanna go forward more, which was interesting because you could tell before I had you loosen up the leash at that first one, it looked like she was gonna charge right through it. But then when I had you loosen up the tension, that's when she actually stopped, right? So dogs have a very strong natural opposition reflex, right? So when they feel any sort of pressure, their natural drive is gonna wanna go into it, so. Okay, so what I want to do today is, we worked the downstays last time. You can work that over the next couple weeks, obviously. But today what I want to do is I want to work some of the off-leash walking with her to help you tighten up your positioning a little bit.
Okay.
So I'll have you go ahead and, no, I'm going to start with her. Let me take the remote here. So I'm going to start off just doing a couple come commands and we'll see what we get. Petunia, come. Good. Okay. Come. So once she gets a little bit smoother with just this individual come command, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start turning it into like an off-leash heel. Because obviously outside on the walk, we use come for our walking as well. So if you look at it, our come command means come to us as well as stay with us. So technically, if I were to tell her, Petunia, come, and then start walking but not release her, the expectation would be that she has to stay next to me still, right? Okay. Got to have just the command itself good first though. Come. And you see she's starting to kind of do it on her own as she's getting into the swing of this. Good. Okay. Come. Good. Okay. All right, I'm gonna have you do a couple of those here real quick.
Okay.
Just regular come commands like that. I'll hold the remote for right now.
No, she just follows me anywhere.
No big deal. Because that's ultimately what we want her to do, you know? That's her just anticipating the command, basically.
Okay.
There you go. Then go ahead and just kind of walk away, and whenever you lose her, you can do another one. Yeah, right. Perfect. Very good.
Okay.
So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the duration into the position. So giving her the command, not releasing her, and expecting that she obviously stays with me. So I'm just going to do short bursts of it to start. Petunia, come. Much better. Good. Okay. Petunia, come. Good catch. Nice. Good job. Good job. Okay, one more. Petunia, come. Now I'm okay as I do this if she lags a little bit behind, as long as she's actively following me. You'll notice with you it'll be a lot tighter, obviously. Good job. Okay. Beautiful. All right, so what I want to see you do next, she's obviously still in the come command because you haven't released her yet. Walk right up to this gate and open this gate up just like you would on the leash. And make sure she stops with you. Beautiful. And then whenever you want to walk through, you can tell her come, then do a little walking around up here and make sure she stays with you. Now, the two things we would correct for as we're doing this is if one, she blatantly stopped following you to go to something else, or two, if she like came to a complete stop. So let's say, caught herself. So let's say you were walking and she started slowing down, then just stopped. We would tell her no for that as well. Good test, look at that. Tell her no.
No.
And then tell her come again.
Come.
Perfect. Then go ahead and keep walking around. So right there, level-wise, that was at about a 25. Obviously, as we get into more of this kind of stuff, off-leash stuff around, more distractions, things like that, you're gonna need a little bit higher of a level for those things. Let's see what we, oh, there we go. Ah, caught herself. Now that I probably would have corrected for as well because she stopped following you, right? You can be pretty strict about this one when you're working it.
Now, is this something just do around the house?
Yeah, in the yard, around the house, wherever you want to work on it. I mean, the reason why I like practicing this off of the leash is because it helps make your leash walking better. Because this is the same exact thing, you know what I mean? Sometimes we get hung up on the leash in our hand, and no different than at the doorways, we try to use it to joystick the dog around too much, and they don't actually learn where they're supposed to be. Where right now, she clearly knows where she's supposed to be, and let's say that 6-foot leash was on her, it wouldn't make any difference, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of get into a state of mind of working on it, pretending that leash wasn't even there, which makes your leash walking like 10 times better. So here's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna take this long line here. We're gonna pop this on her. Okay, come on. And then we're gonna take her in the parking lot and we're gonna work this same thing, pretending we're off leash. She'll have the long line on, obviously, but. Petunia, come. No, come. And I just want this to look the same as inside, just like our leash walking should. No, come. She's doing pretty good. There you go. Good job. No, come. Now, if she gets ahead like that, you could still give your correction. And then a lot of times if I'm doing this, I like to do a little 180 turn to refocus her back in on me, just like I did right there.
Now, how far ahead do you let her go before you correct her?
Once you feel like she's left you. It's kind of subjective based on what you think. Okay. Now you'll see, this is the first time. The first couple laps that we did, her tail was real low, almost like tucked a little bit. She was a little nervous. Right now it's starting to loosen up a little bit. So this gets back to anytime you're working something challenging like this, do a lot of repetitions where she could be successful with it until you start to see her get into a little more neutral of a body language. Because the more she does it well, especially under stressful circumstances, the better she's also, the more confident she's going to become in that thing, right? And on top of that, the more confident in you she's going to become. Right there is fine. Perfect. Very good. Girlfriend's crushing it.